私のクンフ見せてあげる。
So it's the year 2010. Toy Story 3 is one of the top grossing movies, Justin Bieber is everywhere, and John Cena is on his 9th reign as WWE Champion. Insert eye roll and Cena sucks chance. KOF 12, Street Fighter 4 and Tekken 6 were all out, proving that fighting games were not quite dead and making quite the comeback. It had been 10 years since the release of Marvel vs. Capcom 2. To this day, one of the most popular fighting games of all time. 10 years players had been waiting for a sequel, and finally, Capcom answered with a versus game to whet our appetites. 2010 started off with Tatsunoko vs. Capcom Ultimate All-Stars, a game which updated the Japanese exclusive and added more characters, more stages, and was exclusive to the Nintendo Wii. A new update to BlazBlue and KOF 2, which, might add, my personal favourite of the recent KOF series. I still haven't found a character in any fighting game that I vibe with more than Takuma. So amazingly fun to play, and the sprites in this game, damn. But it was of course Super Street Fighter 4 released in April that added more fuel to the fire of fighting games. Early 2010s were all about Street Fighter, and Capcom was just beginning to milk it for all it's worth. This is when I was truly invested, going to the arcades, learning fighting games to not just be better than my mates, but improving as a player. My best memory was losing to the best Chun-Li in the region in a mirror match for like 13, 15 games straight, until I took a match off him. I could feel the improvement. Super Street Fighter 4 wasn't my favourite game ever, but it definitely provided memories I personally will never forget. In 2011, Capcom continued to further update Street Fighter with Arcade Edition, but they didn't stop there. 2011 was the year of Marvel. Tatsunoko vs. Capcom was enough to hold us over, but what we really wanted was Storm, Magneto, Wolverine. Give us what we remembered in Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Marvel vs. Capcom 3 came out in February, and now Capcom had two huge fighting games out at the same time, really solidifying who the king of fighting games were at the time. Marvel vs. Capcom 3 was far from perfect. Wesker was broken as hell, the online was horrendous, and a lot of the veterans that loved Marvel vs. Capcom 2 hated it. But it was still enough to be one of the hypest tournament experiences I can honestly ever remember.
Nice. He's got the infinite! He's got the infinite! Oh my God!
It only got better with Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, but the problem was it was released only 9 months later. Off-putting to some, it was essentially DLC in disc form with more characters, updated presentations, and balance changes. It was better, but players were beginning to feel like Capcom was pushing their luck a little bit of what they could sell us, but hell, we all went back to learning our high-pass combos. For now. 2011 was a big year for fighting games, 2 huge Capcom games and the return of a childhood favourite. Mortal Kombat was back. MK9 was a breath of fresh air, showing us that another company other than Capcom can do this too. It changed the way fighting games can be presented with the gritty Mortal Kombat style, along with the fleshed out story mode and a cast of nostalgic characters. It managed to stand out in a stacked year where other fighting games simply got smothered in Capcom's shadow. MK9, in my opinion, is one of the best fighting games of the decade, and the only thing holding it back was the online, which at this point, nobody had really figured out how to do well in a AAA fighting game yet. 2012 saw a bunch of fighting games, much like how a zombie TV show comes out, does well, and now all of a sudden there are 10 other zombie shows doing exactly the same thing. Fighting games were much the same. BlazBlue, Continuous Shift Extend, DOA 5, Persona 4 Arena, Skullgirls, Soulcalibur V all came out, each holding their niche followings within a growing genre. Let it be known, however, that I'll never forgive Soulcalibur for giving us Alpha Patroclus instead of Setsuka. How very dare you. It was also the year of the now infamous Street Fighter X Tekken. Do you remember where you were when you first saw this reveal? It was a tag game, but it kinda played like a hybrid between Street Fighter IV and Tekken juggle combos. At first, it looked so cool to me. Personally, my childhood was screaming. You mean I get to play my two favorite fighting game franchises in one game? I finally knew how it felt for all those people that loved Marvel so much. Never that into comic books, but this was my ministry. The only other perhaps being some kind of Street Fighter versus Mortal Kombat or something wrestling related. The concept was so good. Everyone couldn't wait to get their hands on this game. Then along came gems. There were attack gems, defense gems, and worst of all, DLC gems, which when you bought them were much better than the originals, coupled with on-disc DLC, which pissed off so many people, and some of the worst netcode I've ever seen in a game on release. And all those issues, coupled with Street Fighter IV still being super popular, everyone just ran back Street Fighter IV and left Street Fighter X Tekken in the dust. Which is a huge shame, because forget the gems, forget the online, forget this guy. This game was actually pretty fun to play, but Capcom, you money-grabbing bastards, you ruined it! But if you're a fan of 3D fighting games, we got Virtua Fighter V Final Showdown, which, now that I think of it, they called it Final Showdown. It could actually be the final Virtua Fighter ever. That hurts my heart. And we got Tekken Tag Tournament 2. And as a Tekken fan, I loved this game. And I hated it. Initially, if you were old enough to remember the original Tekken Tag 1, you were probably really excited for this game. But Tekken had gotten way more complicated since then, and Tekken Tag 2 just made it so much more convoluted. You had all these get-up options, Oki, war combos, crash tags, characters with parries, one wrong get-up and you could very well be dead in 2 combos. That game was super hard and didn't do a lot for the casual fan, but if you're a Tekken fan, it was all we had, and Jun freaking Kazama was back, damn it. In 2013, Capcom released Darkstalkers Resurrection, which was a tiny ray of hope that perhaps Darkstalkers was indeed not dead, and for a little bit of goodwill after burning their audience a little with Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and of course Street Fighter X Tekken. And once again, NetherRealm Studios delivered when we needed them the most with a new IP, Injustice. A game that kinda catered to the newer fighting game player, with easier combos and systems, simpler controls than say a Street Fighter. Injustice was pretty cool, and it proved for NetherRealm that they could succeed with a game not named Mortal Kombat. But in my opinion, the true gem of 2013 was the return of Killer Instinct. Killer Instinct was back, but a lot of us never really got to play it until it was released on PC and Steam years later. This is still though one of my most fun games of the entire decade. Killer Instinct was really easy to get into on the surface with depth upon depth if you truly wanted to learn it. It has a great tutorial mode in the game, an instinct mode which I think Capcom kinda ripped off and called V-Trigger, just saying, and a really fun and easy to understand combo system. The community also really stands out here with one of the most comprehensive guides I have ever seen for anyone thinking of trying to learn this awesome game. The game used people who had history in fighting games, players, developers, editors that clearly know what they're doing. But if you were to ask me what it was that really hooked me, I'd tell you it was the soundtrack. It sounds kind of weird, but my favorite part of a fighting game was the music. It pulled everything together so perfectly. I'd never heard a fighting game really utilize music to emphasize combos during the match, to match what's going on visually. It was truly magical to me. The only thing that saddens me is that it was an Xbox One exclusive for so long, which means the majority of us missed out on the initial hype and learning phases, which are quite important to fighting games. Jumping on when everyone knows what they're already doing is pretty damn hard, especially if you have other options to play. And oh yeah, Killer Instinct still has one of the best online netcodes of any fighting game this decade and prior. Play KI. 2014 felt kinda like the year of updates. We got more BlazBlue, more Persona 4, more Skullgirls, and Ultra Street Fighter, which was basically Capcom saying, yeah, we messed up with Street Fighter Cross Tekken, here are all the assets and characters in Street Fighter 4. Other than Guilty Gear Xrd releasing with one of the most beautiful fighting game visuals any of us had ever seen, there wasn't much going on in 2014. And 2015 was a little bit similar, with anime coming back full force with Under Night and Fighting Climax. And Under Night is probably the best fighting game you're not playing. Just saying. NetherRealm struck once again at a time when we really needed something new. And Mortal Kombat 10 was everything Mortal Kombat 9 was, but better. Better graphics, better story mode, mechanics were tighter, better online, and it was really an uncontested year for any other game, unlike when MK9 was released. Mortal Kombat was great, and not enough can be really said about it. It was probably fighting game of that year and a contender for fighting game of the decade, in my opinion. Not a lot of new games were released in 2016, a new Guilty Gear update and a new KOF which took the game in a visual direction that I personally didn't like. But in February, Capcom released a little game that came out and divided the entire fighting game industry. Everyone had an opinion on it. You either loved it or you hated it. Street Fighter V on release suffered from a lack of options, once again, terrible online, and a visual style that had us wondering why Ken's hair looked like a bunch of bananas. And Street Fighter V's character design decisions never really got better over time. It really felt like an incomplete game, and now people were starting to sour on Capcom as a fighting game developer. After Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Street Fighter Cross Tekken, and now this shoddy release of Street Fighter V, and I can't remember which one, but I personally enjoyed it a lot more during the beta phases. The game changed so much by release, and it felt like they'd taken out some of that personality that I enjoyed earlier in the beta tests. All of this, coupled with what they offered us on release, was the perfect Shoryuken to the bollocks, causing many of us to leave Street Fighter V in the dust and never play it again. And nowadays, Street Fighter V is a lot better, but its rocky start was what caused a lot of naysayers to still say that Street Fighter V sucks to this day. You'd think Capcom would have learned their lesson from this, but the worst was yet to come. In 2017, we got a new update to Guilty Gear, a new Injustice, a new update to Under Night, and again, play that game, and a little game called Marvel Infinite. And everyone and their grandmothers has made a video about what went wrong with that game. We all know by now how it could have been better. My girl-chan did not deserve what happened here, and my only hope is that eventually Marvel can make a comeback, because as a spectator, a lot of the hype Marvel brought at tournaments is gone now, and my lord do I miss it. Needless to say, personally, I was getting a little bit burned out with all of these 2D games. No 3D game this entire decade had really captured the interests of most fans, and Tekken hit right when it needed to, and it was so good. Tekken 7 simplified things a tad, making it a little more accessible for new players, revamped combo systems, and a way to use Rage which changes the dynamic at the end of a match. Also, the inclusion of slow-mo, and whoever at Namco made that decision to add this deserves all the money. What a freaking genius. Whenever slow-mo is triggered at the end of a battle, the entire crowd goes up. It's the very definition of hype, and as a spectator, incredible to watch. Tekken was not the perfect game on release as much as I love it, and was the reason I created this channel in the first place. There were a lot of notable cast members missing, the story mode felt tacked on and weird, and ignored a vast majority of the cast, and you get a bunch of in-game currency which you can't really do anything with, and for a lot of people, the online wasn't great. But for some reason, Tekken 7 captivated non-Tekken fans more than any other, and you'd have to ask them why that was, but so many people were now trying out Tekken. Smash players, Street Fighter players, and Tekken was now as hype as it was back in the Tekken 3 days. Kudos to Harada and team. Following the success of Tekken 7, Soulcalibur followed suit, adding another much-needed game to the 3D fighting game market. The Soulcalibur had a habit of changing drastically from version to version. 2 doesn't feel like 3, which doesn't feel like 4 or 5, and so on. 6 kind of felt like they were trying to appease all of the older fans, and also resurrecting a series that was honestly great and beloved back in Soulcalibur 2. And this year we also got Street Fighter V Arcade Edition, which looked to rectify a lot of the issues that the game had on release. Fighting EX Layer and BlazBlue Cross Tag 2 also came out, which are pretty cool games, but in 2018 it would always be the year that we all thought Dragon Ball was going to take over. Dragon Ball FighterZ was huge. One of the huge criticisms of Marvel Infinite was how bad it looked, and how it looked so muddy and bland, but FighterZ looked like it took the original artwork from the comics and the anime, made it HD, and turned it all the way up. It looked fantastic. It was also pretty easy to get into with simplified combos, and it made the versus style accessible for new players. Marvel Infinite failing when it did and Dragon Ball FighterZ dropping when it did was a perfect 1-2 combo which made the game what it was. Unfortunately, the owners of the IP kind of halted what it could have been, but at this time, Dragon Ball FighterZ was the game to talk about. I still enjoy Dragon Ball FighterZ to this day, but there are clear balancing issues, characters that are clearly better than other characters, and every character's Goku problem is kinda real, but have you seen the show? It's kind of unavoidable. In 2018, Dragon Ball FighterZ was probably the game of the year until a tiny game called Smash Ultimate came out, bringing in literally everything from the Smash series into one enormous complete game. If you liked Smash, this was the definitive version and really ended up 2018 with a bang. And finally, the last year of the decade, 2019, a year which didn't actually see that many releases for fighting games. Dead or Alive 6 was released this year, and I always root for 3D fighting games, but this one actually didn't catch my attention. Still hit into its niche audience. Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, an unlikely gem, and again a game you haven't played that is pretty damn awesome. Samurai Showdown made its return in a world where the term Unga Bunga was coined for just going ham, and Can You Block This gameplay was prevalent. Shamsha was based on normal, spacing, and solid gameplay, but it couldn't escape from bad online, which unfortunately has plagued every SNK release this decade. Unfortunate. But perhaps the biggest game of this year was Mortal Kombat 11. MK delivered again what we expected them to. It's probably the most complete package for a fighting game. They always release with tons of things to do with single player and tons of things to do multiplayer. The gameplay was starting to feel a little seen this before, but all in all, a pretty damn good game. MK11 was probably my fighting game of the year, even though they made me suffer through torturous towers for a slight color variation on Raiden. You heathens. So that was the decade, that is the 2010s for fighting games. It's been one hell of a ride, with Evo numbers going through the roof, more and more tournaments, more and more people trying out fighting games. It's been crazy. Cut to 10 years ago when the only prevalent fighting game was Street Fighter IV, we now have so many fighting games to choose from. The variety is great, and we're not done yet. Granblue Fantasy Versus comes out next year based on the super popular mobile game, but that could actually be pretty huge. And Guilty Gear Strive, which promises to simplify the Guilty Gear system, potentially making it a little bit more accessible for people turned off by all the complicated systems usually found in Guilty Gear. Who really cares, honestly? If they're both fun to play, I'll definitely be playing them. I think though that we are all waiting for that one game that's gonna blow everything up again. It's a little bit too hard for me to pick a game of the decade. How can I choose between how Mortal Kombat 9 made me feel the first time I played it, or how KOF 13 was like a 2D masterpiece, Killer Instinct was great, or how Tekken 7 changed everything for me? I'd be extremely interested to hear your story, and if you have a game of the decade, please let me know in the comment section below. And finally, this channel has officially hit 6,000 peeps. I'm honestly blown away that people listen to me harp on about fighting games. This is 100% a one-person operation, and as much hard work goes into it, it really does feel awesome that you guys are there watching and subbing to my stuff. I don't feature a lot of gameplay on this channel, but if that's more your thing, feel free to follow on Twitch with 2 major updates to Tekken and Street Fighter, as well as Monster Hunter Iceborne coming to PC in January. I'll be streaming a lot of that in the coming weeks, so make sure you're over there for some chill tunes and gameplay. And of course, Expect more to come over here on YouTube. That's of course if YouTube doesn't implode on itself in January 2020. If you enjoyed this video, please consider dropping a like and following for more videos on gaming or the FGC. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you real soon. It only got better with Ultimate Marvel shit! Oh my god. Get out of here, phone. Following the success of Tekken 7, Soulcalibur followed suit, adding following the... Oh my god, I can't speak. I can't say words. In June's... What the hell is June's? It's a little bit too hard for me to play. It's... I fucked that up. I never fucked that up.